This video, I want to talk about what your job actually is as an offlaner, and this is more of a general video, kind of like the introduction, maybe a bit more specific, but I would like to get into the more particular examples in the next couple of videos, and I think this one is really important because you need to have some sort of list of priorities as an offlaner, depending on the draft, of course. And you need to understand as an offlaner what your job actually is in the game to make a list of priorities and to come up with what you actually have to do in the game given like a particular draft. So I think this video is definitely important, albeit I would love to get into actual examples. This is one that I think is necessary. So as an offlaner, you have three main jobs. And these jobs are kind of intertwined in the sense that doing one of them will kind of do all three of them to some extent. But I think these are the big ones that are important enough that they need to be their own kind of rules. So the very first rule is that you need to occupy the time and the resources of the supports during the laning phase. So of course the time of the supports is somewhat a resource of the supports, but what I mean by resources is consumable items, TP scrolls, mana, health, that sort of stuff. And then also you have to occupy their time. And the reason that this is important is because you're essentially this like big distraction, and you're kind of like the wacky inflatable clowns that you saw in, you know, Zombies Ate My Neighbors in Super Nintendo, if anybody's played that. You're essentially this like this entity that exists to kind of like flail yourself around and be like, you know, look at me, you know, I'm a big distraction, come get me. And these guys just go and they focus on you, and you use whatever mechanics you have available to you in the offlane and on your hero to survive, to get as much as you can. And this takes away pressure from the other lanes, and this actually allows you to use a hero who is particularly good at this sort of thing. If you're good at, you know, taunting the supports and getting the supports to come to you, and you're good at also not dying while doing that, then you're relieving pressure from the other lanes, and they're getting almost nothing from it. So you can see how that's very effective at actually winning games and gaining MMR, because you essentially give your team a 4 versus 2 in the other lanes, which obviously is a very large advantage. You know, you've double the people and double the resources and stuff like that. So if you can do that, it's super effective. And a big part of this is to actually put down good wards as an offlaner, because a lot of the time you can't actually occupy all of the time of the supports, but you still gain vision of them. So it's kind of like a, you know, a compromise if you are struggling, and so if you need to take a breath for a second, like for instance to possibly use a shrine or something like that, you're still effective at keeping the other lane safe. Because remember, your job is essentially to be a distraction and to be the guy that everybody's focusing on so that the rest of your team can win the game. And within that bubble, you can still get a lot yourself, but if you have to get nothing to occupy the supports of the time in the laning phase, that is actually worth it. That is okay as an offlaner. In fact, I would argue that in a lot of games, weak offlaners will just go and get a lot of farm themselves, and they'll get a lot of farm in the jungle, they'll buy an Iron Town, they'll get really huge, but then the enemy supports roam mid gets, the enemy mid snowballs and just gets huge, and your mid starts losing the game really hard, and then they'll go and they'll kill your supports, and then maybe they'll be a high enough level that they'll just go kill you and take away your farm. And you can see how this kind of like could snowball out of control if you're not effective at actually wasting their time. And obviously within this series I'm going to get into very good ways to actually waste their time, but the gist of it is to, you know, use your skills to trade hits with them, push out the lane, and, you know, just cause havoc in any way possible depending on your hero. So I will get into that. So the second rule is to try to apply pressure to the carry. And once again, like I said, all of these rules kind of tie into each other. And this one, you can see if you're applying pressure to the carry, that's a very effective way at getting the supports to come try to deal with you, because you essentially are causing this person on their team who's supposed to be their insurance policy, and he's saying like, hey guys, I'm not getting a lot of farm here, I need help. And then the supports come and they help him and they try to kill you. And if you can place good wards and get maintain like a good map awareness of where the supports are, and you can move away and not die when he calls for them to come back. You can kind of play this like this yo-yo thing where you have the supports going to do other things, coming back to you, going to do other things, coming back to you, and never really getting a lot from any of these things because they're so busy yo-yoing between these doing these different things. And it's a very, very strong way at essentially wasting the time of the supports. And of course, if you apply pressure to the carry, it makes the window of opportunity that carry has much smaller because they're getting less farm, so therefore they're going to need a little bit longer to gain resources in order to hit a power spike. So an example of this is Drow Ranger hits a very strong power spike at level 6 or 7 when you have the maxed out aura and then you have the marksmanship from the ultimate. So she does a ton of damage and usually has a good amount of items to keep her tanky so she can go to other lanes and push down towers. But imagine if the supports leave the Drow Ranger's lane and you delay that by a minute. So she's not level 6 for another minute because you're doing some offlane mechanics and denying her XP and maybe harassing her so she has to go back and regen. And let's say that she doesn't have a Dragon Lance at a time where she normally would have a Dragon Lance. She can't go and push those other lanes, and her power spike is minimized. And it's very possible that you can actually take their carry. This is, of course, if the supports don't actually come back and assist the carry, which does happen in a lot of games because the supports do need to help other lanes. The supports aren't just there to exclusively help the carry. So if you can actually apply pressure to the carry, a lot of the times they will just sacrifice the carry. And in a lot of games, it's really, really game-winning. So back to the Drow Ranger example, if you have, like, let's say a Luna and you're versus a Drow Ranger, and you can delay the power spike, so the time where the Drow Ranger is actually powerful by 3 or 4 minutes because you're just doing an excellent job in the offlane at applying pressure, and your Luna is just getting free farm and has that power spike. Guess what? The Luna is going to take down 3 towers, and the Drow Ranger is never going to be able to recover from that because the Luna is going to always have more items than the Drow Ranger, and the Drow Ranger is not going to have map control because those 3 towers are going to be dead. So it all snowballs from there, and all that it required was you to apply pressure to the carry as an offlaner, and you're doing something that effectively assists your carry by applying pressure to their carry. So it's very, very strong to think about it in this way of, okay, this is I need to be doing something to apply pressure to this hero, this particular hero, because of this whole power spike mechanic of when heroes are strong on your team versus their team. And there are some games where the supports will actually do enough in the first couple of minutes that the enemy carry can actually 1v1 you very effectively. And there's actually a lot of scenarios where you'll be against a hero who from straight up level 1 can 1v1 you as an offlaner, and it is hard. That does make the game a lot harder, but there are small mechanics that you can do that still win those lanes just because you're in the offlane and you have the shrine and you have the offlane jungle and all of these things. So there are actually things that you can do even if you're beaten in a 1v1, and I will go over those within this series. But not in this video, not yet. Okay, so the third rule is, once again, these tie into each other, but to get as much as you can without feeding. And the reason I think this is an important rule is because there are actually a lot of games where the effectiveness of the supports depends almost entirely on killing you as many times as possible. And there are a lot of supports that are very weak at actually farming and possibly weak at ganking mid, and there are a lot of situations where if you literally don't feed as an offlaner, you will win the game. So a good example of this is, let's say you're going against like a Shadow Demon Mirana combo. I'm sure everybody who's listening to this guide has dealt with a combo like that, where it's pretty easy. You just imprison them with the Shadow Demon, and then you set up a free 4-second goddamn arrow, and it's very strong and very annoying. But is that support duo good if it's running around and not killing anybody? Not really. It loses its effectiveness, right? At that point, you'd be better off with just some farming supports that are a little greedier. And if you have greedy supports on your team, or supports that don't just rely on kills to gain resources and help out on the map. So, for instance, if you have a jungler or something like that, and you can just not die to those killing supports, your team's going to gain more resources than they are, just because you're sacrificing yourself and just yourself to hurt these 2 supports that need to get kills on you to win the game. So that's a really important rule, I think, is to recognize when you're in a situation where it's like, okay, the only way we lose this is if I feed. And honestly, there are points where even if it's not some killing supports, just recognizing, like, having restraint, having an objective mindset of, okay, I've died twice, I've gotten to the point where I can't actually do anything in this lane. My best course of action is just to cease feeding, is just to stop feeding and just do something else that will make it so I don't feed. Because believe me, I'm sure everybody listening to this guide, you've played some pubs and you've had an offlaner who goes like 0-8 by 10 minutes, and it's just so hard because you pretty much have 3 cores coming from the safe lane because the supports are so overleveled and the carry is so overleveled. And that's because you get to a tipping point as an offlaner where there's actually nothing that you can do other than just not feed and maybe jungle, and you can't do these tricks or apply pressure or try to waste the time of the supports because you've gotten to that point where you're too under leveled, you're too under farmed, where they will just kill you from full HP every time. And you need to recognize that situation and just stop the feeding, because in a lot of games, you'll come back eventually. You'll take the space of the enemy you'll take the space that your team provides you, and you'll come back eventually, and all you needed to do was just not feed and just to chill out for the rest of the laning phase. So those are the 3 rules. Pretty important, because the rest of the series is going to be based on these kind of rules that you need to do as a job to be an effective offlaner. So thanks for watching, and the next video is going to be on warding, and I'm going to be very specific with a lot of examples. So apologies for the general videos, but I do think they're necessary. So anyway, we'll get into it. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.